This podcast contains some explicit language from the start.
In the space of 10 days, I lost my home, I lost my relationship, I'd lost my job, and I lost my stepfamily.
Welcome to Another Door podcast. Another Door is a place that you come to when you're rethinking your work, whether it's job loss, a career change, or you just want to rethink how you are doing your work right now. Come and find us at anotherdoor.co.uk. In my quest to find interesting guests for Another Door podcast, I frequently search LinkedIn, Instagram, other podcasts. I'm always looking for someone who has a very interesting Another Door story to tell, and the guest with me today really stood out. I followed her on LinkedIn, Carolyn Hobdey, and stood out because look at her LinkedIn profile, an amazing career in HR director in some big names. And then I noticed some posts around her books and some of her work, and it got me interested, got me intrigued. What has brought on this change of career? Is it a change of career, or is she just doing it in a different way? So I had to get her on to tell her Another Door story and to share her work. Fascinating stuff. I'd love to know what you think. I'm not going to give too much away in this introduction. I feel like the story unfolds as we speak. So please let us know. Drop a note in the reviews, drop me a message. And also tell me who you would like me to talk to. It's got to be somebody interesting with an Another Door story. Love to hear that door closing and what happened next, and share with you their life lessons, really. Carolyn, welcome to Another Door podcast.
Thank you.
Obviously, your book caught my eye, which we'll probably talk about at some point.
Yeah.
Then I'm loving your LinkedIn banner, which we will talk about in a minute. Then I was like, oh my God, I've got a list here of all these things that this is hilarious. Some of these posts that you write, just brilliant stuff. And I think the thing that really resonated amongst all the brilliant headlines and all of the, De-Twat Your Life and all the rest of it was this whole message about being unapologetically you. And I was like, oh my God, if someone is just living that, apart from Madonna, you're probably next in line. So I've got to get you on to talk about that. But before we get stuck in, maybe a quick introduction, who you are, and then we're going to go right into all of the little teasers that I've just talked about just now.
Good stuff. Well, I spent, now it's about 25 years, which makes me feel very old, but being an HR professional, and I had an amazing career. So whilst I probably will talk about that later on and some of my reasons for leaving and things, but I had a 25-year career, which was amazing. I worked for some of the world's largest employers and some of the best known brands that are out there. And I worked my way up in a very sort of linear fashion, really, through HR. Although one of the things that's more unusual that I did during that is that I got a master's degree in lean operations, particularly in lean manufacturing. I specialized in manufacturing because those were mostly the environments I worked in. So that probably is a little bit more unusual to have that alongside the HR stuff as well.
Yeah.
And then it was actually in 2018, and I know we'll get into that in terms of like what my Another Door moment was, but I had a huge life change in 2018, which we'll talk about a bit more. But that really set me on the path of, okay, I really need to understand, how did I end up here? What were the things that got me to that point? And that was both personally and professionally. I just realized that I just needed to step out. And I think, if I'm really honest, I think I was burnt out, again, personally and professionally together at the same time, because it's never as straightforward as one or the other. And I just became burnt out and I wanted to step away. And I'd already, by then, at that point, started writing my first book. And I was doing that whilst I was working. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to take the opportunity to step away for a while and do something else and actually just rediscover who I am. And I'd done quite a lot of that work between 2018 and 2020. But I think really when I stepped away in 2020, which happened to coincide beautifully with the start of the pandemic. So, which wasn't by design, it was pure luck. But actually, as an HR professional, it meant that I could stand back and watch the carnage that became the HR profession in the world of work during COVID. But just allowed me to step back and, like you say, reconnect with myself. And that's when I got into the sort of being unapologetically yourself, which again, I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about. So that's really my background. So now I'm an author, a mentor, and a change and leadership expert.
This is where this is, standard conversation so far. Very successful HR director, doing something different. But as we're about to reveal, takes a really interesting turn. Are you looking for somebody to help you rethink your work? Are you looking for somebody who has got something to say, something different? Perhaps you're creating an event, you've got a conference coming up, and you're looking for speakers or workshops that really get people rethinking. Check out our platform with fresh new voices and people who've got something to say. Come and see us at recommended.anotherdoor.co.uk. Let's get into the another door moment.
So in 2018, I was in a relationship. I'd been in that relationship for 3 years. I had a job that I absolutely loved. However, I had a change of line manager, which started out okay, but he became more and more maverick and bullying. And I ended up then at that point being what I would describe as the only bird on the board. As it turned out, really the only one that was prepared to stand up to him. So there was lots of talk to me in the background from other board members about this individual's behavior and it getting more and more maverick and out of control and people not agreeing with it. But we'd suddenly find when we got into a room together that quite often I was the only one that was prepared to sort of voice concerns around that, and not with an intention of derailing that person, but going, this is not good. This is not good for the business. This is not good in terms of the way that we're treating people. And I stood up to that and I paid the price. So even though I worked in an organization or through an organization who absolutely prides itself on its values and its people, when push comes to shove, profits came first. And so out of the two of us, even though they knew what this person was like, it wasn't that they didn't believe me, because they really did. But the choice then became, and their decision was that I had to go because it was untenable for me to continue. So that had happened, and I was absolutely in the throes of that, and I was devastated. I had worked there for a number of years. I absolutely loved my team. I'd built a fantastic team of people. And so I was devastated to be going, and not least because it was kind of made to look like I'd done something wrong, and I really hadn't. So that was really devastating personally. So I was right in the thick of that. That had literally happened like 10 days earlier. And I woke up it was a Friday morning. It happened to be Friday, the 13th of July, 2018. And my partner of 3 years, he and I, we'd sold the house we were living in, and we were going through that process and talking about, where we might move to next. And that had been quite traumatic, all the sort of reasons behind that. He walked into the bedroom and said, when the house sale goes through, this is over. I'm leaving you, and you'll never see my kids again. So I had co-parented his 3 children. I had them 50% of the time. And he'd very much encouraged that relationship that I had with them and said, that's it, we're done, it's over. It turns out he'd found my replacement and actually asked her to marry him in the background. But what actually it then allowed me to do was to actually come out and be honest that had been an emotionally abusive relationship. So I'd been suffering at the hands of his emotional abuse and his coercive control for about nearly 2 years at that point. But being a confident, professional, successful, very well educated, articulate woman, I wouldn't really allow myself to believe that what he was doing to me was what he was doing to me, because I just felt deep shame around that. So really, to wrap up that story, and hence my another door moment, was that in the space of 10 days, I lost my home, I lost my relationship, I'd lost my job, and I lost my stepfamily. And I write about it very honestly in the work that I do, and certainly in my first book that I started to write on the back of that I got to the point of suicide, and I had to be rescued from that by somebody. And that was really the pivotal moment, because like I said, that was the moment where I had to go, how did I end up here? You know, I had a bully at home. I had actually 2 bullies, I'll be honest, at work that I was coping with. And I had to sort of take a look at, who have I been? And I'm not to say that they're, you know, if people do bad things, then that's their responsibility. But I had to try and understand for myself how I'd sort of allowed those people into my life and to stay in my life. And it had been a pattern that I realized. And that was really the epiphany, I think, for me.
As you say, you're so transparent with that and sharing. And I think what people will appreciate when they start following you, if they're not following you already, is how transparent you are, but also now you offer it with such energy and optimism. It's crazy. Like, to hear you tell that story, and it's quite fresh. It's not like it was 10, 20 years ago, but now you're in such this optimistic, even the imagery, you know, you've always got like a boxing glove, or, you know, it's so powerful.
Yeah.
So it's just incredible, and such a strong message for people. So yeah, let's get into it. Your first book, you've got a few.
Yeah.
What was the driver behind that? Was that you trying to work it out, or had you already worked it out and wanted to share? Or because I'm fascinated with where that came from.
Yeah, it was the latter of those two, actually. And I went into therapy at that point. I was put with a clinical psychologist because I had a lot of stuff to unpack. And also, I'm not going to apologize for the fact that I'm an intelligent woman. And they knew when they assessed me that I was going to need somebody that was going to be able to work with that, and not somebody, dare I say it, that I would be able to sort of mentally run rings around. I needed somebody that was going to, sort of help me through that process and challenge me. And I started working with a therapist, and I ended up seeing her, I think, for about 9 months in all. And it was some way along that journey, particularly, I guess, in those initial stages where I was sort of telling her my story, my life story, and actually remembering things that I didn't even realize I'd remembered. And I was working with this clinical psychologist. She was very experienced. She was a very smart woman. She was absolutely lovely. She was the kind of woman that, had circumstances been different, I think we'd have gone down the pub and had a glass of wine together. She was kind of my kind of woman. But I would tell her my story, and what came to realize as a pattern of, I would reach a certain point and then I'd go, oh yeah, and then this happened, and then I'd move on. She'd go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's just step back a minute and actually talk about it. She said, because that's huge. And yet you've just sort of talked about it like it was like, oh, and then this happened in my life. And that was like just incidental. And what I started to realize is that I had a lot of story, like everybody does. I had a lot of story, but I had an awful lot of things that I'd dealt with and overcome. And I started to think, hang on a minute, I think I've got a story to tell, because there were times when she was kind of open-mouthed, and I'm thinking, you must have heard a lot of stuff during your career. But she was kind of open-mouthed with some of the things that I'd just dealt with and then moved on with, and then just picked myself up from and progressed. And I think it was really over that period of time that I thought, I think I've got a story worth telling in some way. And it was really on the back of that. And then, as you do, life brings other people in, and I met somebody else and was sort of talking to them about it. And they said, you need to write this stuff down. And I think more than anything, one of my huge hobby horses, unsurprisingly, is about, domestic violence and domestic abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse. Those are big sort of hobby horses of mine and passions of mine. And I think more than anything, I thought, you know what, if I can write my story, and if I can write my story from a place of no shame, and write it in a very raw way. And, it's my story. So my first book, as you know, it's called All the Twats I Met Along the Way. But I'm very honest in that I was one of those twats. And that's how sort of De-Twat Your Life comes into play, sort of the second book of the Twats Trilogy, because it's really about saying, we have to deal with our own inner twat first, which by that I mean, that negative self-talk, how hard we can be on ourselves, how judgmental we can be of ourselves, how we make excuses for other people's behavior and don't have boundaries and all of those things. And I was that person. And I was a twat to me. I was sometimes a bit of a twat to other people. And I wanted to tell that raw story and go, this is just what it's like to be a human being. It isn't some glossy story. I want to tell it real and raw, because I thought, do you know what? If I can help just one other person, and of course, women are more, they gravitate to my stuff, probably more than men. But I do have men that message me, plenty of men that have messaged me and said, this really resonates with me too. But I think it's that thing of going, we're not perfect. We are massively flawed. It's all about sort of working out this whole adulting thing that we're expected just to know how to do. And I think by telling it in a really raw way, I just wanted to help somebody else who maybe isn't necessarily suffering from domestic abuse or violence, but is maybe just living a life that they just don't really want to be in some way, shape or form. And that was really the driver behind telling the story, really.
Yeah, I love it. I just want to pick something up before I go straight into the books. The bit around the person who you first went to for help and you were very selective. You didn't want to have rings around them. Interesting. That's really interesting. I wonder how many people pretend they're getting help, but actually playing still.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I think that's often the case, because it takes a lot of work, and it takes a huge amount of honesty, a lot of looking in the mirror, because I could have. And the one thing I absolutely didn't want in writing of my book was ever, with any of the things that had happened to me in my life, to sound like a victim, because I didn't feel like a victim, because I was determined not to be a victim, and I was determined to take responsibility for the decisions I'd made, and quite often letting people into my life that I shouldn't, or letting them stay around when I shouldn't. And I was determined to take responsibility for that. But it is that thing of, it's not woe is me, but it is also about saying you have to be prepared to see and feel and hear some stuff that goes to the core of who you are and is at times deeply uncomfortable and unpleasant, in order to then, make those changes and make that improvement. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people will dance around the edges, and possibly even, counselors themselves, will just let people, oh yeah, we think we've kind of made progress, like away you go. But I was very fortunate. Like I said, I had this amazing lady who was not going to let me off the hook for this stuff.
And it really comes through. As you say, it's deep, and then it goes deeper and deeper. That's the work. And that's where you're in continuous improvement. It's almost embracing your inner twat, to use your terminology.
Yeah, absolutely. And also as well, the other thing that I don't ever want people to think is that, oh, I've done this work and I'm fixed.
Yes.
And I'm done, because I'm not. And it's always finding that balance, because on the one hand, people can go, well, unless you've got it all sussed, why would I sort of follow you or take your advice? But it's about this thing of actually, it is all a process. It is a constant, it's about constantly looking to be better and improve, but at the same time, not being hard on yourself about that. It's not about beating yourself up, but it's constantly looking for those little bits of improvement that make life just better and more positive, and helping people to find that fine balance between the two.
Yeah. And that's certainly what's come across, because I think sometimes it can feel like pressure on yourself. As you say, you do have to take responsibility and accountability, but sometimes that message comes with even more pressure. But again, your messaging is so, it's kind of light in that way, as it's not to be on your shoulders. It's just more as an empowerment statement. Yeah. Not as like it's your fault. It's the blame piece, or, oh God, I've done this, I need to take more accountability. So in your work now, how does all this show up? How has that kind of opened a new door to how you work and what you do now?
Yeah, well, I think there's kind of two sides to what I do. And I'm just about to launch my new website, actually, which is about putting, really embracing the midlife mistress branding, because I guess we've not talked about that. That then, out
the next door, there's yet another
that was the next door that opened. The next evolution really was then about when I discovered sort of became much more comfortable with who I am. That's kind of how the midlife mistress was born. And it's no more complicated than the fact that, midlife starts from the age of 40, and I'm definitely beyond the age of 40. So this midlife period where we sort of stand there and go, like, actually, I've probably potentially got like more years behind me than I've got ahead of me, but actually I still want all this stuff to count. So it's really about embracing that midlife period. And then when people ask me the question about it, why the mistress, does it make me sound a little bit like a hooker or a dominatrix? Yes, it does. Do I care about that? No, I don't. Is that part of the reason I did it? Oh, yes. But also it's the fact that I'm a woman. And so out there, when I was looking, there was lots of mastery, which is all great and good and comfortable with that term. But mastery is inherently male in its terminology. And I wanted something that was it isn't about the fact that I just work with women. Like I said, I engage a lot with a lot of guys, but it's more that idea of I want to stand proud in my femininity and who I am. So hence why the midlife mistress came about. But for me now, my website sort of splits off into two directions. One is called the Leaders Lounge, and that's all about working with, mid to senior leaders, very much working on their leadership style, and absolutely now really focusing on the leadership style that's needed really post-pandemic and for the future, because kind of what's got us here isn't right for what's going to get us there, especially as we head into things like, sort of potential recession and financial difficulties and all the pressures that are now around. So the Leaders Lounge is very much about my simple model of leadership, and sort of 6 simple strategies to make leaders inspirational and make them stand out as a leader. And really about, what I say is it puts them in the top 10% of leaders anywhere. And then the other side of my site is known as the Broad Room. And that's really particularly where I've engaged more with women. It's very much around the sort of De-Twat process, albeit the tools, I use tools between the two sides really, but very much the Broad Room is, I sort of say it's kind of that ladies only area where us girls sometimes just need to talk about the stuff that us girls need to talk about. And that might be professional, it might be personal. I do talk quite a little bit around menopause because I'm really passionate about that, because again, that's also part of my backstory. But it's not just around that. It's really just about, like you say, I mean, my branding on that is, I am woman, I am me, I am enough. And that's really the branding around there, and about helping women to really find that direction, particularly again, when they hit that midlife point, which, has a lot of complexity and, destabilizing elements in it. And really just helping women to go, right, what is it that I want from here? How do I make it count? And really for both leaders and within the Broad Room, I think it's about saying, what's the legacy I want to leave behind?
Does your branding put people off, make people comment, various conversations? How does that work, given that, you talk a lot about twats and all the rest of it?
Does it put people off? I'm absolutely certain it does. Without a shadow of a doubt. I think that it's really interesting because you get a really mixed reaction. Because the thing is about the word twat is that most people do find it quite funny.
Yeah.
What I find really curious about the word twat actually is that even though obviously it's a slang term for a woman's genitals, when we say the word twat, we instantly think of a man.
It's so true.
And that's what happens. It's like, oh, you're saying that all men are twats. And it's like, no, I'm saying we're all twats, actually. But it's really interesting, isn't it? It's a slang term for female genitals. But when you say the word twat, we always think it's going to be a bloke that's been a twat. So I get really interesting feedback about that. And like you say, people are a bit kind of love it or loathe it. Yeah. Most people aren't really offended by it. What's really interesting, so one of my stories, a number of months ago, I went for a non-exec director position, and I got this position, and it was with the NHS, which I've never worked in the NHS. They wanted somebody with HR expertise, so I ticked that box, but obviously I didn't come from an NHS background. And I've never been a non-exec director before, and it was outside of my geographical area. But against all of those odds, they met me, loved me, offered me the job. And obviously, but they want sort of a people specialist. And I was like, yeah, I'm well up for this. I think I bring loads of value. They agreed with that. 10 days later, they withdrew the offer because somebody had Googled me and found that I wrote books with the word twat in the title. And they said they thought I would contravene their values and behaviours. And I said, well, surely only my values and behaviours would contravene your values and behaviours. But you use the word twat. We can't. And they just absolutely. And I said, but you're hiring me for my HR expertise. The titles of my book really have no bearing on that at all. Oh no. So they absolutely. So have I completely cut myself off probably from the public sector? Probably totally. But do you know what? They're not my people. If the word twat offends you, I'm not for you. It's really as simple as that. Other people, though, a bit like you, absolutely embrace it. I've got another business contact that I'm, we're developing some work together, who absolutely, I think probably maybe even found me on LinkedIn or maybe on Instagram. But straight off, I got this voice note from this amazing woman, powerhouse of a woman, who left me a voice note and went, I've just found you and the title of your books. Oh my God, I've met so many twats. We've got to talk to each other, whatever. And it's gone from there. So, like I said, it's, you'll either love it or you'll loathe it. And, and I've had people say, my new website is about to go live, very much the midlife mistress branding. I had a completely different photo shoot on there. And am I standing in a leather corset in some of those pictures? Yes, I am. And, I had somebody say to me, well, it looks a little bit like soft porn. I was like, brilliant. Because I'm not going to be anything other than, who I am. And, do I spend my life walking around in a black leather corset? No, I don't. But, should I be able to do that if I choose? Yes, I think I should. And so, there's definitely a bit of that vibe that's a bit kind of like, well, this is just who I am and I'm showing up as me. And if people, again, just find the kind of that look isn't for them, then that's okay. That's also their choice. I don't judge them for that.
Oh, I love it. And as I say, go on your LinkedIn and have a look at your amazing CV and all the credentials and all the safe, brilliant jobs you've done. Tick. And then this unapologetic person explodes with them. I love it. I love what you say as well about words. That's fascinating. I wonder if people have the same conversations, because now every book's got fuck in it.
Yeah.
Fuck this one. It's all about that. I wonder if that's the same or it's just twat. I don't think there's a C book yet. I haven't seen a C.
There isn't, but I do have plans to write one. So the third book of my Twats
and I couldn't even say that. Why couldn't I say the C?
Yeah. Well, it's so I'll share that in a sec. But the third book of my trilogy I'm writing at the moment, which is Twats at Work. So that's the third book of the Twats trilogy. Once that is done, I've already got scoped out, and I won't use the word in case it does offend anybody, but I've scoped out a book, the title for which is called Death by 1,000 Cuts, although it's not obviously cuts. And so that is one of my planned books for the future, because I think it's a genius title, and there's some topics that I want to talk about in there. But I don't know. I just think that. I don't know. I don't think that twat is massively offensive. Yeah. And it's really interesting because some of my posts on Instagram, I did just a couple of days ago, is Dawn French, who I love, and I love her comedy. She is going on tour next year, and the title of her show is Dawn French is a Huge Twat. And that's the title of her tour. And I'm like, yes. So I ended up posting and going, Dawn French is on the same mission that I'm on in terms of like this word, because we do find it funny. And yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's like massively offensive, but I have had people, particularly on things like Facebook, where obviously, you've got an international audience, particularly American people going, does twat have the same meaning in the UK? Are we speaking the same language and the same kind of English? And I was like, It does. It has these two meanings. They're like, oh yes, that's the snake. That's the snake. So yeah, I think Americans maybe have a bit more of a problem.
Interesting what you said about, we think of man, because when I first saw your book title, De-Twat Your Life, I was like, oh, what, get rid of all the men that have been in it,
Yeah.
which, to a degree, it's kind of that way, but it's not, as you say, it's deeper about being unapologetically you.
Yeah.
So it's doing its job. It's kind of provoking that thought, and we get it. And as you say, it's bringing in a different kind of person into your work as well. So what kind of leadership groups would you be working with? I'm really curious if that can kind of link up together, because I imagine when you start your leadership work, how tempted is it to be kind of starting off with that, right? Hands up, who's a twat? Let's just get this out of the way.
Yeah. You have to kind of read the room. Inevitably, there is a little bit of kind of like, and the thing is, if people are prepared to hire you, then they'll have looked at my stuff. They'll have seen my website, inevitably they'll see who I am. And, so like I said, they're either okay with it or they're not. And obviously I had a long history in particularly manufacturing environments, retail environments. Let's be really honest, the word twat is not the worst word you're going to hear in those environments. And there are times when I've had to be what I describe as scary and sweary, which makes me sound like two of the Spice Girls.
Not get you whipped out though.
No, well, if they really ask the question, if you ask me nicely, but it's, I've worked in those environments, so I'm not fazed by, those very sort of masculine environments where, there is quite a lot of swearing or whatever, and people don't even realize it. And the bit that always makes me laugh is that then they'd swear and they go, oh, I'm really sorry, love, I'm really sorry. I'm like, don't worry, I don't fucking mind. Is usually my response. I think it's that thing of, if they've hired me, they already know what they're getting. Do I go in sometimes and go, right, okay, so hands up, anyone who thinks they're a bit of a twat. And like I said, you have to read the room as to whether you start that way or whether that comes a little bit later on. But then it is about explaining that, we can be real twats to ourselves, and I'm holding my hands up to being that. And it is about doing that deeper work then that says, what is it that makes you that way? What has happened to you? What experiences have you had that make you speak harshly? And so many leaders, anyway, that I've encountered during my career and now encounter in my work, they really suffer from that imposter syndrome. And I know that, that gets bantered around almost like too much now, but there's a lot of imposter syndrome. There's a lot of not feeling good enough. There's a lot of speaking very harshly to themselves, lots of long hours, driving themselves into the ground and all this stuff, and that's being a twat. In my working career, lots of leaders who bluntly in the workplace were a bit of a bastard, or a twat, or whatever you want to refer to them as. And when you then speak to those people outside of work, they're incredibly kind. They would hate to think that their family are there going, yeah, they're a bit of a bastard. They wouldn't be thought about like that by their family and friends, with most of them, but they're feeling the need to live up to this strange leadership blueprint where it's all a bit command and control. We have to be a bit of a bastard. We have to act like we know it all the time. And for most people, it makes them really stressed out because, like I said, I'm trying to shoehorn myself into something that just doesn't really fit me. But we feel like we have to because that's what we think a good leader looks like. And that's part of what I'm then trying to work with leadership teams around, that goes, no. Let's just get back to being much more human. Let's make this whole leadership thing much more simple. And therefore we can act much more in line with who we are and be a fantastic leader, because that is what's going to set you apart.
I love the fact we started as your HR career and we've ended up in this kind of twatty kind of, I don't know, you wearing a corset and whipping everyone's shit. I love that. I love that.
But it's, for me, it is about, and I haven't put it like this, out there in the work that I do, but it is about kind of, let's go in and de-twat a bit of this leadership stuff, because it is about doing that. And it is about saying it's okay to show up as you. And for me, it's very much about, my simple model is very much about showing up as a human being. So this idea that, de-twat your life, like you said, the being unapologetically yourself, Of course, that sits under the broadroom side of my work. But the whole point is that those same tools and techniques, I might speak about them a bit differently in a corporate and a leadership setting, and I usually do. But really, it's the same sorts of tools and techniques. It's like, actually, let's just really understand who you are at your core, what matters to you, how you want to show up and how you ought to, you want to behave rather than the shoulds and the oughts. And then once you do that, oh my God, you become so much better as a leader. And your people want to follow you, they connect with you more, you feel less stressed out. And actually, my most recent piece of work that I'm putting out there is a white paper I've written that's called No More People Problems, because it's absolutely about when you start showing up differently as a leader, funnily enough, those people problems, they all start to disappear.
Didn't you send your book to Liz Truss? Have I imagined that?
I did send my book to Liz Truss. I did do that when
you sent De-Twat Your Life.
I sent De-Twat Your Life because I kind of felt like maybe she needed it, and it turns out she needed it way more than I even imagined. And also, I just don't think she read it fast enough and implemented it quickly enough, because events overtook her. And I'm really hoping, in my head, she left it on the nightstand at number 10 and Rishi's now picked it up. That's what I'm really thinking has gone on. But I did. And I tell you, one of the reasons why, not because it massively for me was anything about the politics, but I also posted on the day that she was declared as the winner of the leadership race in the Tory party. I also posted because within minutes, they were then talking on the news about her and slagging her off and saying how she was going to be crap. Now, okay, some of that turned out to be like a bit true, but I actually also posted and said, hang on a minute, how many of us on our first day in a job would have to put up with everyone going, welcome, you're going to be shit. And I said, that behavior, I'm really sorry, but we have to do better than that, because that's not right and good and fair. So hence why I wrote to her, and I wrote her a letter and I said, look, I'm not really bothered in terms of your politics, but here's all my experience. I think I've got something to offer. I can stand on the outside and criticize, or I can get stuck in. Here's who I am. Here's my CV, happy to do it. And here's a copy of my book, because I think you might need it. And in fact, actually on my board behind me, here's the letter from number 10 that I got. But they wrote back very quickly, which in itself was a bit of a worry, because I'm thinking they didn't have anything better to do. They wrote back and sort of thanked me for the book, and then was like, oh, if you want to apply for a job, then go on our website. And I was like, no, you're not really getting it. But I do sort of sincerely hope that she left the book behind. And I am tempted. I have been thinking about writing to Rishi and going, look, now that you've sort of settled in for a few weeks, I'm hoping Liz has left a copy of my book. I'm here if you need me. And also I said, it is a bit of that pretty woman moment. I had that pretty woman moment when she also obviously left office, that said, like, I offered my services, Liz. Big mistake.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing. As I said, I just think it's a really powerful Another Door story. And I just love this unapologetically you, but also bringing it into your work. You're bringing it back in to give other people that kind of permission to explore. And it's just so powerful. Where can people find you? Where's the best place to find you?
Well, obviously LinkedIn is a great place to find me. So you can find me as Carolyn Hobdey on there. But obviously, like you say, you'll spot me because the Midlife Mistress branding is on there. Instagram, so I'm the midlife_mistress on Instagram. So I hang out there an awful lot. And then my website. So you can either find me through carolynhobdey.com, or if you do midlifemistress.com, both will lead you to my website.
Brilliant. I have loved chatting to you. I could have gone on so much longer with so many different things, but maybe have you back on with your next books the next time you come on.
Twats at Work. We can definitely talk about something like that.
It sounds like a topic we need to talk about. So yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been my honor to be on. Thank you very much.
Are you looking for somebody to help you rethink your work? Are you looking for somebody who has got something to say, something different? Perhaps you're creating an event, you've got a conference coming up, and you're looking for speakers or workshops that really get people rethinking. Check out our platform with fresh new voices and people who've got something to say. Come and see us at recommended.anotherdoor.co.uk. Love this podcast? Give us a 5-star review or rate us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. It can really help us make more great content like this episode and get it out to a wider audience.